of Zoning Appeals. Present are Mr. Robinson, Mr. Morrison, Mr. Judon, Ms. Grass, Ms. Richards, Ms. Vargas, and Mr. Bennett. Present from the planning staff are Mr. Batchelder, Ms. Ashby, and Ms. Stepp. These proceedings are being recorded, and we ask those who speak to identify themselves for the record. We'll conduct this meeting in usual fashion. We'll first receive information from city staff about the application and their recommendation. If the recommendation is favorable and no one objects to the application, usually the Board of Zoning Appeals treats the matter as being uncontested and passes it as a matter of course. If, however, the city recommends against the application or there is opposition to the application, we treat the application as contested and hear from the applicant and anyone else who is in favor of the application. Next, we hear from anyone opposed, followed by a short rebuttal from the applicant. We then close the public hearing portion of the meeting for that particular application and open discussion to the Board of Zoning Appeals members only. We'll then make a decision to approve with conditions, or deny the application. The Board of Zoning Appeals zoning has the authority to do three things. First, to hear appeals to decisions of the zoning administrator. Second, to grant special exceptions to fact-finding function of the board. And third, to grant variances to the zoning ordinance if the application meets the hardship test outlined in section 54.924 of the ordinance. The board may deliberate and make a final decision on a matter by a majority vote of members present at the hearing and qualified to vote, provided that not less than a quorum is present and qualified to vote. However, an affirmative vote of 2/3 of the board members present and voting shall be required before a use variance may be granted. For a variance to be granted, the Board of Zoning Appeals must make the following findings. A, that there are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property. B, these conditions do not generally apply to other property in the vicinity. C, because of these conditions, the application of the ordinance to the particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. And D, the authorization of a variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property or to the public good, and the character of the district would not be harmed by the granting of the variance. Mr. Batchelder, you have anything else to add?
I do not.
With that, the first item on the agenda is number 4, Orrs Court, West Side. Request an exception to under section 54.501 to allow construction of a single-family residence on a lot of insufficient size. Lot area 2,088 square feet, 2,500 square feet required. Zone DR2F. Mr. Batchelder.
This application concerns a residentially zoned property in the West Side neighborhood. This is a map that shows the property on Orrs Court, just south of Sumter Street. It is also across the street from Burke High School. That is the large property on the other side of Orrs Court. What you can see in this map very clearly is that this is a very small lot. You can see that it was subdivided out of the larger original lot that fronts on Orrs Court many years ago. That apparently it's been a separate lot since at least 1970 or so, and I think based on what I see in the records, it may have been created in the 50s. But as far as I can tell, it's never had a house on it. It's always been a vacant lot. Here's the zoning map, and this adds the building layer into the map as well as the zoning layer with the different colors. And you see that the remainder of what is for Orr's Court has a house on it in the back. And then this narrow, essentially it's a driveway that leads back to the house. You see the other houses along Orr's Court. Here's an aerial view. This is the lot in question right here. So we have a variety of one-story and two-story houses on Orr's Court. Here's the survey just showing the proposed site plan. I've got a better view, close-up view of that. So this is the house that they would like to build on this lot. And the lot, with being less than 2,500 square feet in size, is falls into this category of a vacant lot that requires a special exception because of its small size to have a single-family residence constructed on it. This is the section of the zoning ordinance that applies. So, and basically it says that if you can't meet the minimum lot size requirements, the Board of Zoning Appeals may, upon approval of a site plan deemed not in conflict with the intent and purposes of this ordinance, authorize any use permitted in the district in which the lot is located. And a lot that was 2,500 square feet in size or larger would be permitted to have a single family home on it without any board approval or board review. In this case, because of that size, again, it requires your approval. Again, here's a site plan, and what this does is shows the footprint of the house as well as the 2 parking spaces. Residence requires 2 parking spaces, 2 off-street parking spaces. And when they first submitted their plans, the stair on the front of the house was centered on that porch. And that eliminated one of those parking spaces. And so we asked them to come up with a different design that accommodated 2 parking spaces, and they were able to do that by narrowing the stair and shifting it over a little bit. And both those parking spaces are 9 by 19 feet, so they meet the minimum size requirements of a standard parking space according to our zoning ordinance. Close-up view of that. And then the floor plans. This is a 3-bedroom house, about 1,400 square feet in size, 2 stories over a raised foundation, again, raised to meet the flood zone elevation requirements for this area. And that's basically it. So they did present this to the neighborhood association, and that was back in October. And that's why this item was deferred, because we wanted them to go talk to the neighborhood association. They did that, and we received an email from the president of that neighborhood association, George Palmer, indicating that the neighborhood association voted to support this project. And I should also point out that this plan is a second attempt by the applicant, basically, to come up with a plan for this lot. The first design for a house was larger. It required setback variances, and we said, as I recall, and this is a year ago, that we would not be supportive of that request because it was too large for this lot. So they went back to the drawing board and downsized the house to what you see now, and it doesn't require any setback variances. So we think that this is an appropriate plan for the lot, and we recommend approval of this. There's no opposition that we're aware of. Nobody has signed up to speak, so we recommend approval of this application.
City recommends approval. There is no opposition. Are there any questions, comments, or motions from the board?
I move to approve.
Second.
Moved and second. All those signify by saying aye or nay. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Mr. Judon,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Ms. Vargas,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett.
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye as well. The application is unanimously approved. Thank you very much. Second item on the agenda is 32 Cooper Street, East Side. Request use variance from section 54203 to allow an office use in an existing building in a DR2F diverse residential zone district. Please let the record show that Mr. Bennett has recused from this item. Mr. Batchelder.
Okay. There we go. 32 Cooper Street. This is within the East Side neighborhood, and you can see from this map, north side of Cooper Street, and just east of East Bay Street, block and a half. This is the zoning map, and you can see along East Bay Street, properties that have commercial or industrial zonings. That's reflected with the red and the pinkish color. And then the neighborhood with its brown residential shading for the DR2F residential zoning district. This property sits right in the midst of the neighborhood. And the applicant is requesting a use variance for this building that sits on this lot. And this is one of those unusual circumstances that we come across occasionally now. But the property, and you'll see in these records that were submitted with the application, has a history and really was originally built for non-residential uses. And so it was never used as a residence, but it's been vacant for many years. And because of the fact that it's been vacant, in order for somebody to go back and reuse this building in a way that doesn't comply with the residential zoning of the property, they need a use variance approval from you. So this is the history of use of this little building. And going all the way back to 1938, there was a record of this little blue tavern being there, and that was there until the late 50s. And then it apparently became a sweet shop. And then and then we're not sure after that, but it was owned by this lodge. And so maybe it was used by that lodge for their space, and but never residential. And these are the old Sanborn maps showing the building on this property going all the way back to, this is the earliest, these are, go back to 1951, this is 1944. And then here's just a map showing the other non-residential uses in the area of this property in the gray. not zoned for commercial uses, but many of those have commercial or institutional church uses. There's a museum a block away, the Philip Simmons House Museum on Blake Street, a little store, kind of a landmark on Cooper Street right here, the Fair Deal Grocery, which was a popular place when I was driving down Cooper Street to get on the old Cooper River Bridge to go to Mount Pleasant. But this building was kind of a nondescript building. It never stood out to me when I was making that trip, and I made it probably several hundred times. And we'll zip along. These are floor plans, site plans showing how the building sits on the property. There's room for parking on the property. And then this just shows how you could park and access that parking on the property. And these are floor plans. So it never had any residential use. It never was cut up into rooms. There's these meeting and office spaces and I guess a tavern space at one time. And this is, so these are elevations showing the building itself. I'm getting to the photographs. I probably should have put those up front. So these are the photographs that show the existing building, and you can see it's not a residential structure. This has a very commercial-like storefront-like front facade, and who knows what it was originally used for, but not a residential building. And other views, this is a lodge across the street. The Fair Deal Grocery is right here, kind of catty corner from this property on the south side of Cooper Street. And the applicant, of course, explained their reasons for the variance, which basically reflect what I've just said: the history of the use of the building, never being residential, and and we agree that the property itself represents a hardship. It's unique and doesn't lend itself to residential use. What they would like to do is use it for an office use, very neighborhood friendly type use, and it won't adversely affect the neighborhood. They've presented this to the neighborhood association, and to the best of our knowledge, nobody is opposed. Nobody has expressed any opposition to this request. So we feel that they meet the variance test with this proposal, and we recommend approval of it to you.
He recommends approval, and we're told there's no opposition. Mr. Batchel, a 2/3 majority is necessary for this application to be approved.
That's correct.
That would be 4 members. One is abstaining. I think it's 4 members, 2/3.
That's right. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't. Okay.
Mr. Batchelder, my mind may have drifted a moment, but you mentioned the neighborhood association had considered it. Did they support it?
So on the 21st of October, the applicant presented this information to the Eastside Community Development Board, and we have not heard back from them, and the applicant, as far as I know, has not heard back from them. And they're on the call. They can speak to that if you'd like, but they haven't, and they would contact us if they had a problem with it, they know how to get in touch with us and let us know.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions, or is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye, opposed nay. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Mr. Judon,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Ms. Vargas,
Aye.
Mr. Robinson's aye. The motion unanimously passes and the application is approved. Thank you very much.
Mr. Robinson, please, for clarification, who made the motion, please?
I did, Penny.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Morrison.
Very good. Item number 3 is 471 Hugh G. Street, Hampton Park Terrace. Requests a special exception under section 54.110 to allow a vertical extension, a dormer, to a non-conforming building footprint that does not meet the required 9-foot west side setback, zone DR1F. Mr. Batchelder.
Now I've got to get, oh, I know how to do that now. Okay, I've got to bring John Bennett back, and I'm doing that right now. And that means he's back.
For the record, Mr. Bennett is back with us and we'll vote on this item.
So So 471 Hugie Street. Okay, there we go. So my map here shows that it's a corner property on Hugie and Glenwood Avenue. This is a single family residence. This aerial view shows the existing house. The front of it is right here on Hugie Street. You'll see photographs of the side view and then a view down this side yard between the two houses. So again, this is the front of the house on Hugie Street. And it's very attractive, unique house in the neighborhood, and very beautiful house, but a one-story, essentially a one-story house. It does have a half-story, but it's a small half-story. I'm not sure they even have living space up there. And the goal of this application is for them, the owners, to receive your approval to construct a dormer addition onto the second, essentially the half story, so that they can expand the living space from the ground floor up into the half story area, essentially a second floor. But this is the view from Glenwood Avenue. Again, very interesting design, unique features, and becomes a challenge with these homes to try and figure out ways to expand them without compromising the architectural integrity of the house. And here's the side view looking at the side adjacent to that neighboring property on Hugie Street. So how do you expand this house? Well, they've come up with a plan that adds a dormer in this area right here. So I move ahead. Hugie Street is over on your right in this view. Glenwood is at the bottom of this site plan. The neighboring house on Hugie is at the top. And what they would like to do is construct a dormer addition in this location, not altering the Hugie Street frontage or the Glenwood Avenue frontage, only the side of the house that faces the neighboring property. And to do that, because this footprint, as you can see, is quite close to the side property line, does not meet the required west side setback, of 9 feet. So to add essentially a second floor to that side of the house, they have to extend that non-conforming building footprint with a vertical addition. And here's the elevation. So again, from Glenwood Avenue, nothing changes with regard to this portion of the house. There is a little change to this deck back here, but that doesn't require BZA approval. On the other side of the house, facing the adjacent home on Hugie Street, this is the dormer addition right here. And what that does is allow them to have all this space up there that they don't currently have. This is a view that shows that you can just barely see it, but this would be the dormer addition right here. Kind of hidden from view from Hugie Street. Certainly you wouldn't see it from Glenwood Avenue, but you would see it from the neighboring house. And this is a view from the rear of the house, or of the rear of the house. And this right here is the dormer addition right there. And then existing view, you know, there's no dormer back here. It's just a gable end. And another view of that. So the applicant submitted this with their application explaining the proposal and how it has a very beneficial effect to them without adversely affecting their neighbors. And they also reached out to those neighbors and obtained letters of support that they submitted with the application. So they have letters of support from the neighbor next door at 473 Hugie Street, neighbor across the street at 464 Hugie Street, and the neighbor on 9 Glenwood Drive. So all the immediate neighbors, I guess, have signed these letters of support. And I don't know, Cassandra Salgado and Tracy Davis, 9 Glenwood Avenue. Grayson Hudgens, 473 Hugie Street. And Andrew Wilkins at 464 Hugie Street.
So, Mr. Batchelder, one of those three is the immediate next door neighbor, closest to the proposed addition.
Right, this neighbor right here is 473 Hugie Street, and they have signed a letter saying they support this.
Thank you.
So, and going back to what I said at the beginning, these homes are a challenge to make changes and additions to them without compromising the architectural integrity. I think they've developed a really good plan that does not compromise the architectural integrity and does not adversely affect the neighbor. You can see the house next door, of course, is a 2-story house and might have a window. I'm sure it probably does have some windows over on that side. They're looking at a roof right now, and they'll look at the side of this dormer, I suppose, but it won't be right up on them. I mean, this kind of is a little bit misleading, I guess. There's a little bit of distance there. So I think this is a very good way of accomplishing the goal without, again, creating a problem for the neighborhood from an architectural standpoint or for the neighbor who's immediately impacted. Light and air, I think, are the critical things. And then the other thing with this is the adverse impact on the aesthetic character of the neighborhood. And again, I feel that they meet the special exception test and recommend approval of this request.
The city recommends approval, and we're told there's no opposition. Any questions from the board or any motions?
I just have one question. Since this house is in the Hampton Park Terrace National Register District, does it have to go before BAR?
It will go through them for I suppose it will go through them because they do have a higher level of demolition review authority. So if you make changes to a roof, for instance, like they're proposing to do, I think that would require their approval.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions, any motions?
That's my guess.
Is there a motion?
I move for approval.
A second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Mr. Judon,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Ms. Vargas,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. Robinson's aye. The motion unanimously passes and the application is approved. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is 430 King Street, Radcliffe Borough. Request a special exception under section 54206 to allow late night use expansion of the first floor for an existing restaurant and bar within 500 feet of a residential zone district. Request a special exception under 54511 to allow an expansion for an existing restaurant and bar first floor with 432 square feet of inside patron use area without providing required parking, 3 spaces, zone general business. Mr. Batchelder.
So first, let me just say this expansion is approval is being requested by Halls to allow them to expand into an adjoining building or an adjoining space within a building that they currently use. And Halls restaurant is a late night use because they do stay open past midnight. They have the right to stay open past midnight, and they sell alcohol, and they're within 500 feet of a residentially zoned property. So those are the criteria that create this need for the special exception. Staying open past midnight, serving alcohol, and being located within 500 feet of residentially zoned property. The expansion that they're proposing will not stay open past midnight. However, the ordinance, with the way it's written, says that any facility that is basically a late night use, as I've characterized it, cannot expand without your approval. So just want to make that distinction right off the bat. The zoning map here shows the location of 430 King Street. You can see it's right north of the building that sits on the corner of John and King Street. And you can see on the left side the residentially zoned property, as well as on Radcliffe Street. That brown shading represents a residentially zoned property, and that's within 500 feet. So this is the building, and 430 King Street is this building right here. And what they're proposing with this expansion is using the ground level of that, or a portion of the ground level of that building for this expanded area for their business. This shows the ground floor plan of the existing and proposed facility. So here you have the main restaurant and the main kitchen. In 432, you have another room for the restaurant and bathroom space. And 430 Street is where this request is to allow the expansion. And this would be an event space, not a restaurant use, but available for private events. And there would be this additional kitchen space back here. The kitchen space is not the issue, it's the additional patron use area, which is shaded in this darker gray. That patron use area amounts to 564 square feet. And and then the second floor of the buildings is shown here. So you have existing restaurant space, 434 and 432. And the second floor of 430 King Street is already used as office space and pantry space. So that doesn't require your approval. It's already there. The only piece we're really talking about is the front half of 430 King Street. And when we have a late night use, or when a late night use is proposed to be added as a new use or enlarged, there's this special exception zoning process that an applicant needs to go through. And we've done this a number of times on several properties. Sometimes we've taken a position that we can't support the request, and in at least one occasion, the board denied such a request after the applicant decided to move forward over our objections. So we tried to come up with a fair way to apply the set of rules that City Council adopted. And this goes back to 2015 when Council, after several years really of debate and study, adopted these rules that we have today that control new late night uses on King Street and the expansions of existing late night uses. So it was an attempt to try and manage the impacts of these uses on the street. The police department was very involved, and it's worked pretty well. It hadn't been easy to apply, but it's worked pretty well. So we've got this small space up front on the ground floor, and they have submitted this additional information with their application to help illustrate how the rules apply and how they meet the rules in their opinion. So here you see the residentially zoned properties and the distances to those. So it's 202 feet at the closest point. Here you see the other late night uses within what we define as a block based on the language in the ordinance, and that's 175 feet on either side of the property where the late night use is located. And you can see in blue the other existing late night uses, and you can see the occupancy limits for those uses. So there's a series of requirements that we have to find, and we'll go through those in a minute. And in the case of a proposed late night use or an expansion of a late night use that is located in a block with a heavy concentration, there are additional criteria that we have to consider, but this is not one of those situations. You only get to a heavy concentration when you've got one use that has an occupancy limit of more than 300 people, or you have a total occupancy based on the total number of people allowed in all the establishments that exceeds 1,000 people. We don't have that in either situation here. And then there's the parking side of this too. There's a parking requirement that goes with this additional patron use area over and above what the hair salon had that occupied this space. And that is the 3 spaces listed on your agenda. And they can't provide those because as you see here, the property itself, the building itself rather, occupies the entire property. There's no additional space for any off-street parking on this property. So they are seeking a special exception to not provide those 3 additional spaces. So they've addressed the special exception requirement, and I'll go through that at the end in further detail, but we feel that they meet the special exception requirement because they did come up with a short-term lease, only 5 years versus a 10 that's acceptable from a zoning standpoint for where those spaces would be provided. And I'll show you that at the end. And then they've also addressed the special exception test that applies to late night uses. And that considers the garbage, recycling, maintenance equipment for the existing restaurant and whether they're stored, where they're stored, and the accessibility for pickup of garbage and recycling and all that sort of thing. And they meet all those requirements. They're doing that now. This isn't going to really change what they currently do. And the expansion is within the existing structure and is located a considerable distance away from the nearest residential zoning district. Any potential noise is not a factor. That's another consideration. Is the noise generation that might come from a late night use. But we don't feel that that's a factor in this case. And then the parking that they're proposing is in the surface parking lot to the back of the property. And if you look at this, there's a large surface lot here that they use already, and they've secured additional spaces in that lot. So moving back on to number 6, again, the expansion is not in a heavy concentration area, so that doesn't apply. So we feel that they meet the special exception test for the expansion of the late night use. And again, we've taken a position in other cases where people, in our opinion, didn't meet that requirement because oftentimes it's because there's already a heavy concentration of late night uses. And in those instances, we've tried to hold the line and not allow for any new late night uses or any expansions of existing uses. And here's the parking lot. They have all these spaces under lease, except for this one space along John Street right here. This is how they can valet park in that lot and increase the amount of parking. And this is the 5-year lease that they signed back in August for 21 spaces. So we believe that they meet the special exception requirement for the late night use expansion. Again, the event space that they're proposing will not operate past midnight. It's very small, and of course it's visible, so it's not something that would be difficult to enforce if there was an issue with them operating beyond midnight in this space. That's another thing. One of the purposes of this ordinance was to limit the number of late night uses and the occupant loads, because when 2 o'clock rolls around and these places are closing and all those people are coming out on the narrow sidewalks on King Street, it becomes a real problem and a safety issue. And so the fact that this would close at midnight would mean that these people, these additional people, would not necessarily be leaving late at night, being 1 or 2 in the morning. So again, I think that issue is addressed by the closing of the space at midnight. So our recommendation is for approval of this request. The applicant did reach out to the Radcliffe Borough Neighborhood Association, and we received an email from Henry Golobeck, who is the president of that neighborhood association, indicating that they have no objections to this request. And as far as we know, there are no other people that have expressed any opposition to this request. And again, we recommend approval.
City recommends approval, and we're told there's no opposition. Are there any questions or any motions?
I just had,
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Robin.
go ahead, Ally.
No, I was moving for approval, so ask your question.
Oh, no, my only question was, so they currently occupy all of the second floor of all of those buildings? And
Yes,
so, already, and so it's just that one downstairs space that I assume has always been some type of retail space?
right. It's been this, this is a view from 2019, and you can see it was a hair salon.
That's where Lee and I get our hair blown dry.
I'm sorry for you guys.
They blew my hair right away.
I hate that we're gonna lose this place.
So instead of some type of retail space, it will be an event space that potentially would only be used at night, or will it?
Well, it wouldn't be used past midnight. It could
And it
be,
wouldn't be used past
daytime.
midnight, so that's the issue.
right.
Okay.
Any other questions, any motions?
I'll move for approval.
I'll second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Mr. Judon,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Ms. Vargas,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved and is the application. Thank you very much. Next item is 51 Noonan Street, West Side. Request a variance from section 54-301 to allow an addition that expands an existing porch and bedroom with 59% lot occupancy, with 50% limitation, And the existing lot occupancy is 56%, zone DR2F. Mr. Batchelder.
So again, a zoning map, or not, this isn't the zoning map, but it's a map that clearly shows how small this lot is. This is a lot that is slightly larger than 1,500 square feet, and versus the 2,500 square foot required by this zoning district, and probably other lots on Noonan Street are closer, much closer to that number, if not meeting that requirement. But this lot, as you can see, is unique in terms of its size in that area of Noonan Street. Zoning map shows the house that sits on that property and occupies a good portion of the lot. Here is the house. It's a one-story house sitting on the ground. And this is an area, the west side of the West Side neighborhood, that is low and subject to flooding issues. So this applicant, I believe a new owner of the property, would like to make improvements to the property. And in doing so, they will exceed the 50% of the value of the existing house. And when you do that, and you're in a flood zone, and the house is not compliant with those flood zone requirements, you've got to raise that house to meet flood zone FEMA requirements. So that's what they're proposing to do. And while they do that, they would like to make some changes to the house. And I'll show you those. So here's the existing house footprint. You can see that it meets the rear setback, and it doesn't encroach into the west side setback, the 7-foot zone. But it has this odd shape on the west side of the rear addition. It's not square. So they would like to change that and square that off when they raise the house. And they would like to widen this porch so that the stairs to access the front door will be internal to the porch. And as you'll see, this house, to meet the flood zone requirements, has to be elevated a full story. So the stairs are very important. So here's the new footprint that they're proposing. The wider porch and the rear part of the house has been squared off. Here's the ground floor showing how those stairs, you would access the house by going through a door on the street and up these stairs to get to the front door, which is right here. This exhibit shows the actual expanded footprint, and this is what's requiring your approval for a variance, because it increases the non-conforming lot occupancy. This small area that's shaded here is that increase, basically. So the increase goes from 56%, is already non-conforming, to 59%. When 50% is the allowed lot occupancy. Existing elevations and this proposed view. And it's not that they're going up a lot further than they have to. They are actually going up just enough to meet that flood zone elevation requirement, just to give you an idea of how low this area is versus the flood zone elevation that's required.
So what is that, like more than 12 feet?
Well, it's in an AE 13 zone, and the city has a 2-foot freeboard requirement. So you have to be at elevation 15,
Wow,
not 13 that's required by the federal government.
wow.
Yeah. And they've addressed the variance test, and I think quite adequately. They have a very small lot and a lot that's low, and they want to put money into this property, and the only way to do that is to elevate it and meet the FEMA requirements. So that is what they are proposing, and we feel that they meet the variance test. Again, the applicant presented this to the West Side Neighborhood Association back in October, and we have that email from George Palmer, the president of that neighborhood association, indicating that they voted to support this request. And we're not aware of any objections to this request, so we recommend approval.
City recommends approval, and we're told there's no opposition. Are there any questions or any motions?
Move for approval.
Second? Good. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Mr. Jadon,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Ms. Vargas,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. Robinson's aye. The motion unanimously passes, as does the application. Thank you very much.
Mr. Robinson, I'm sorry, once again, who seconded the motion, please? Wasn't quite clear on the voice.
It was
Aye.
me or Mr. Jodon.
Either one of that matter.
Okay, thank you.
Good. The final item on the agenda is number 11 Tarleton Drive, South Windermere. Request a variance from section 54-301 to allow an existing carport to be replaced with an attached addition garage with a 14-foot, 10-inch setback from the rear property line, 25 feet required, zone SR1. And let the record show that Mr. Bennett has recused from this item. Mr. Batchelder.
This is a residential property in South Windermere. Here is the zoning map showing the location of the property in the midst of the neighborhood. And aerial view. What we have here is a carport and this shed in the back. Those two features on this property will be replaced by a new garage, and that's the nature of this request. So these are photographs of the existing property. You see the carport here and the shed in the back. Another view of the back shed right here in the carport, and this is the main house. Survey of the property and the plan. So this line right here represents the carport. And then you have this shed in the back. The carport and the shed would be removed under this proposal, and the garage would be constructed shown here. Footprint. The details are shown here. And the issue is that this back wall of this garage doesn't meet the rear setback requirement of 25 feet. The side over here does meet this 9-foot side setback, but the rear portion of the garage encroaches into the 25-foot rear setback. And in elevation, this is what the garage would look like. Have the existing house and the proposed garage right here. Side view. No, this is the rear view of the garage. And the side views here. Again, the applicant submitted their request with explanation that we agree with on how they think they meet the variance test. And they did indicate to us that they reached out to the neighbors and provided copies of the plans to those neighbors, asking for their support. And they never, I believe they never really heard back. Let me see, grab this. Yeah, we received an email from Chris Bonner, the architect, indicating that the owners have indicated that they talked about putting the garage there and with the side and rear neighbors in an abstract manner. They have physical copies of the drawings, and I've directed them to share it with the neighbors now specifically for a response. Indicated any type of communication, text, email, etc., as a response would be helpful. And as of October 5th, he was still waiting for replies. And I don't believe, Penny, you received anything additional on this.
Mr. Batchelder, yes, sir. The last sheet of the plans, we received 4 text messages from neighbors.
Oh, that's right. That's right. So yes, we did receive those text messages, and those, I guess they didn't make it on the PowerPoint.
Right.
But we have from Fletcher Penny at 16 Lord Ashley Drive, from Phil and Grand Brooks at 14 Lord Ashley Drive, Anna and Alan Westerland at 13 Tarleton Drive, and Lindsay Stidham, at 9 Tarleton Drive, all indicate that they support this request. So
no Windermere Neighborhood Association comment?
Penny, would you like to?
Not to my knowledge, Ms. Morrison. I believe that the applicant is also the designer, the architect for this application, and he may be in attendance. I believe there may have been a discussion with the neighborhood association, but I do know that direct contact were made with those residents that provided their text messages.
And I can certainly unmute them if you'd like to hear from them.
I was just curious. I personally think it's an improvement.
So our recommendation is for approval of this request.
City recommends approval, and we understand there's no opposition. Any other questions or motions?
Move approval.
I'll second it.
Been a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Mr. Judon,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Ms. Vargas Vargas,
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion unanimously passes, as does the application. Thank you very much. And that concludes the meeting.
Okay.
Let me bring back John if he's still there. Let's see. This is a new trick that I've learned today, so
Well done.
let's see. Nope, he's not here.
He's eating dinner.
No, you canceled him.
Send him off in Never Never Land.
Thank you all. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
In Penny's backdrop somewhere.
Thank you
very
all.
much.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.
All
Have a
right,
nice
be
evening.
safe going home.
Bye.
All right, take care.